on our data transformation panel discussion where we're looking at talking about becoming a data-centric organization. Well, organizations on a transformational journey should rethink current data paradigms and analyze every aspect of their business for potential growth factors. With big data and analytics, business can become more data-focused, thus optimizing their existing processes and improving financial outcomes. We're looking at talking about reimagine the organization with data at its core, drive home the tenets of the data governance and ethical data usage to all data citizens. Also, we're looking at talking about enabling organizations to operationalize data and analytics to drive business value, modernizing legacy systems to maximize revenue, leveraging data virtualization to unify data and modernize the underlying systems, democratizing data and analytics and making it data-driven insights accessible with data stories and visualizations, and applications of the big data and edge computing for threat detection in IoT. David Zakkam, the Vice President Analytics Swiggy, who's joining us. David has 17 plus years of experience in analytics and data science. At Swiggy, his team focuses on problems in the hyperlocal delivery and food tech space. He's somebody who's led analytics teams of over 450 people and managed senior client relationships in Europe and the US. Thank you so much, David, for joining us. We also have Ujjayini Mitra, the Chief Data Officer, Z. Ujjayini has 14 years of rich leadership experience in establishing data as a culture at large organizations, successfully building and leading center of excellence through creative methods and leading business strategies through data-driven actionable insights. Thank you so much, Ujjayini, for joining us today. Well, we also have Pawan Kumar, Head Data Science and Analytics Uber, who's joining us. Pawan is the data science leader with more than 10 years of experience in building data-driven consumer products in the hyper-local social and technology domains. He's currently heading the data science and analytics for Uber India, solving a variety of mobility-related problems. Thank you so much, Pawan, for joining us today. We also have Divya Kumar, Chief Data Officer, Ikea, who's joined us. Divya has over 2 decades of experience in strategy, finance, and analytics. She is a certified independent board director and has worked in various industries across the US, Europe, and India. Thank you so much, Divya, for joining us today. We also have Achal Anand, the Director of Analytics, PhonePe, who's joining us. Achal has rich experience of 11 years in pricing, predictive, and business analytics. Before joining PhonePe, he had worked in a variety of business analytics roles at Flipkart, TCS, and Mu Sigma, Affine Analytics as well. Thank you so much, Achal, for joining us today. And ladies and gentlemen, this entire conversation is going to be moderated by Ravi Shankar, Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer, Denodo. Ravi is a published author and a frequent speaker on data management and governance. He is responsible for Denodo's global marketing efforts and his deep expertise in data-related technologies, helping enterprises to adopt modern data integration and data management solutions. Thank you so much, Ravi, for joining us and giving us your valuable time. Well, ladies and gentlemen, with this, you've got your eminent panel on your stage and screen. Ravi, I'd pass it over to you now to take the reins from my hand and have a great panel discussion with your eminent panel. Thank you for joining us. Over to you, Ravi.
Thank you, Bhavana. Thanks for the introduction. All right, it's great to meet all of you. It's a great panel that has been assembled here. I'm pretty sure our audience will have a lovely discussion. The poll was pretty eye-opening for me to see, how long it takes for people to basically react and provide the critical information. We are all executives to some extent within our organizations, and if the data comes back to us to make critical decisions, it takes days, weeks, or even some people don't even know how long it takes. God bless us, because it's we won't be able to affect the change that is needed. So let me start with my first question. We are kind of talking about the organizations being data-centric, right? So today's organizations would claim that they are data-centric. So I don't think anyone would probably defy that or deny that, I would say. But the degree to which that each one is data-driven varies from one organization to another. To me, a true test of how resilient you were as an organization would have been last March, when basically the economy shut down, the revenue basically plummeted, and then you have people being either let go or the budgets being cut. We all saw this reality. But you had to still move on as an organization. So how did you basically were able to come up with that information? So David, let me start with you. Answer this question for our audience. How soon were you able to provide the data to your management team, or were your team able to provide to you to affect decisions to change course? Did it take days, weeks, months to provide the necessary insight to either accelerate the business transformation or to continue the existing business operations?
Thanks, Ravi. Happy to be here. Just a little bit of context about Swiggy, right? We think of Swiggy as a tech company, but at the end of the day, it's actually a logistics company trying to send perishable, delicate goods across hyperlocal distances, right? The company actually runs on data. So without the optimizations that data can do, the company is just going to be we go bad. Okay. So back to this, right? The company cannot survive without analysis happening. So for us, when the shutdown happened, rebounding from that was very, very important. So from our perspective, the data systems, the analysis, the dashboards, our machine learning models actually never went down at all. So we had zero downtime on any of that. What actually happened was 90% of the zones were shut down across the country overnight. For us, because data was so important to us, data was not actually the problem for us. It was actually getting those zones to open. So working with the district magistrates to actually get them to allow food things like that. That was what was actually focused for us. What took time was our ML models to respond. For example, point A to point B, how long does it take? Obviously, after March last year, it drastically changed. A, there was no traffic on the road, so things couldn't move faster. But B, there were roadblocks on the roads, which meant things didn't move faster. They just got stuck. So that response to that actually took some time for us. Maybe a month or so for the ML models to actually relearn themselves. There are other things like our long-term forecasting models, which actually took maybe 6 months to respond. So the ML models kind of took time to respond, but the data itself, we were very, very fast in responding.
Gotcha. All right. Very interesting to kind of know about, even though like the traffic pattern would have been easier, but the roadblocks were basically slowing you down. Interesting. Yeah. Divya, let me turn to you. We all know that retail took a pretty big hit because of the shutdown. And I'm pretty sure like, Ikea would have been in that particular category. You as the chief data officer, how soon did you provide the data back to your management team, your CEOs or line of business executives, so that they can actually figure out how exactly to rework the business in order to continue the revenue coming in?
Thanks, Ravi, and good to be here with all of you. We have to understand that, during the COVID period is when somehow the importance of data really surfaced. We always knew the importance of data, but suddenly it became about day-to-day data requirements and needs, which was probably not as intense and high before. Ikea, as you know, is across 40 countries, 400 stores, plus e-commerce, plus centers business. It's a highly complex business. And that being the case, making sense of what is happening in each country, right? Because the situation was not the same in every country. So there is that much of a need for, not just a global analysis, but also very localized analysis that actually surfaced very strongly during this time. If I look at data needs, I look at it, if I were to simplify it, I would look at it in three parts. One is data for decision making. And that, according to me, took days. What changed there is the type of data that you need, the amount of scenario analysis that you need, which was not the same as in usual times. The second part of it is customer data, right? Consumer data. So how do customers behave? Because that changed drastically during this period. I mean, suddenly people were shopping in a very different manner. Both what they were shopping for as well as how they were shopping was very different. How do we ingest that into our business and actually make the changes from our side to cater to the customer behavior? And the third type is about the operations itself, right? Exactly like what David said, there is a hugely complex fulfillment operations. There is a lot of backend apart from fulfillment also. how do you really use the data in that customer behavior and then make the changes to your operational model, the operating model at the back, to actually cater to the needs, the changing needs? And that, of course, takes a little bit longer, but that data became so much more important during that time.
True. I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of, data saw its light during this time. People started paying attention. Without data, they couldn't really figure out exactly what was happening and make the decisions that are needed. That's great. Ujjayini, let me turn to you next. So from Z perspective, what was the challenges that you guys actually went through, and how quick did you react to provide the information back to your executives to affect any decisions that they need to make?
Thank you, Ravi. And this is really a great session listening to David and Divya so far. In Z and Z5, I think like David mentioned, the challenge was not as much how fast we can solve the data, because when we established the whole data org from day one, we actually built up the proper data lake, a pretty agile system, the anomaly detection, all those things were pretty much automated. So serving data was never a challenge. The biggest challenge actually happened is all the studios got shut down. If all the studios are getting shut down, and ultimately this is a business of content where content comes on the platform every day, more than 100 hours of content comes every day. And with content shut down, we never had the new content to refresh on the platform. Right. So with that, I think the bigger question came like, okay, how quickly we can analyze and figure out how we can fill up those gaps. So good thing was that, the way we design our data team has a kind of a today, tomorrow, future structure, where the future team is always looking for lots of experimental works, right? And they do keep on looking at social information and other informations. What actually, we found that thinking a little different than the way day-to-day business actually happens is very important, because we suddenly realized that during our social information or even our call center people, like what they are talking, we realized people talk about our legacy content, like Pavitra Rishta and all those contents, which are evergreen, which actually doesn't require to create a new content around. We suddenly repurposed those content, but this analytics, which helped the business to strategize that even if the new content's not coming, how can I engage my consumer with the very different kinds of content which we already have off the shelf. I think those kind of things helped us a lot. Yes, so I think data was never a challenge. To be able to strategize how we do and how data can help them do that. And because we had this future group, which helps us experimenting different new kind of work, I think that helped a lot.
Awesome. Good to know that you had your infrastructure already in place, because as soon as the shutdown happened, I think many people started tuning to Z to kind of see all the shows, I guess.
Yeah,
all
actually
right,
our subscription business, went up drastically, and lots of people, because the TV contents were dried up and they were not necessarily getting that, they actually converted to subscribers and started consuming more premium content. Now that posed a very different kind of challenge, like how am I going to now serve a very different kind of consumer segments? How do I understand them? So that's where we had to go and start working better.
Interesting. That's always a good problem to have. All right, so let's actually move on to Pawan. Pawan, Uber, just like anything else, was shut down because, like as David mentioned, like the roads were basically empty. People were not traveling. So what did you guys have to do in terms of trying to respond to such a situation and provide the necessary information to your executives?
Yeah, so I think great points. I think David mentioned a bunch of things with how they approached the situation. Divya actually gave her perspective with Ikea, right, and Ujjayini with Z. We actually took a three-phased approach, right? So we looked at the business as like one, monitoring business, right, managing the business, and three, change business, right? We actually carved out the data into three different sections, right? So monitoring, right? So when things were actually moving, we were in the growth phase. When everything was like going as per plan, we were actually monitoring a different set of success metrics, right? When the world came to a stop, it really emphasized that, hey, we need to rethink of what are we monitoring right now, right? Are we looking at reliability? Are we looking at growth? Are we looking at fulfillment? Are we looking at safety? So we started off with like, what is our core success metric during this time frame, right? To educate our business leaders in terms of saying, hey, so far we've been looking at growth, we've been looking at, driving business and so on and so forth. Now we need to take a step back and see, what do we need to monitor, right? To assess the current conditions, to assess, how our business is impacting, how our business is changing. So we start off with like, what should we monitor, right? We looked at different aspects of data. We looked at, different cohorts. We have drivers, we have riders, we have fleet partners, we have time taken to travel, safety as an aspect, right? So we had to come up with new set of success metrics, right? We started with that. Then we started, managing the business, right? What data points do you use to manage the business, right? So you still have, operations partners at airports. Airports was locked. Some parts of the airports were still open. What are some other tools and data technology and tools that we can just offer to our, operation partner, to our drivers, to, our riders, so that, they're able to efficiently manage their rides, right? So the other aspect was managing, right? So we looked at data, how are our data products today structured to be able to kind of fulfill that needs, right? So then we had a different strategy coming out with like new different data products that came into picture. And the third was change business, right? We were actually going through a change, right? We didn't know how long this was going to last. And the third is where we actually also spent a decent amount of time thinking about, hey, what is the new world going to look like, right? So this is when we actually had to reprioritize our business. Now, this is where I think we dropped a lot of like shared rights. So there was no pools, there was no buses, there was no shuttles, right? We actually deprioritized all of them, and we pushed micro mobility as an option on top, right? With micro mobility going up, you're kind of like relying on scooters and bikes with, you have that safety rail. You're not, you're ensuring that you're socially distant, you're physically distant, and how are we actually going to leverage our products that we have in terms of offering? How can we change that? And additionally, I think this was also an area where Uber actually went deeper in terms of logistics, in terms of grocery deliveries, right? If you look at US and Europe as a market, we actually doubled down on providing a lot of groceries, right? So the third construct was more around change business, right? So we actually put together a framework saying, hey, monitor, manage, and change. What are the things that we are going to actually influence, right? Everything changed for us. But I think this framework it was also a great framework for business leaders to understand. It was also so easy to communicate. And we also like split the entire data to say, hey, there is a team that's actually looking at monitoring, right? Everything needs to change there. We're looking at managing. What are the new data products that needs to come out, right? In terms of safety, in terms of, customer relationship, reliability, partners, right? What are the new data products that needs to go out there? And third is change business. How do we change the strategy, right? So how do we start experimenting with different things, right? So this is the kind of framework that we built and, went about, solving for this problem during that time.
Awesome. And nothing like a catastrophe to kind of like challenge our previous assumptions and, rework them. And just like, thanks for putting all that business in place. I was ordering all my groceries online and having them delivered. I did not venture into the stores, and, I was sick of my own food. I had started ordering using Uber Eats. So great. Achal, let's come to you as the last one. So how did your business kind of get affected, and how you as the director of analytics provided the necessary insights to your executive team or line of business to affect any change that they need?
Yeah. Hi, Ravi. Thank you for having me, first of all. A pleasure hearing from the others in the panel as well. And at the start, I just want to set context that PhonePe, we were in a different situation compared to the others. We were actually a benefactor of COVID. We saw growth. We saw people sitting at home doing more digital payments. To answer your question specifically, we are the youngest company, I think, in this panel, and PhonePe started in 2016. And a lot of us have come from internet companies background and tech companies and bigger companies like Flipkart, Amazon, Swiggy, Uber. And coming from this background, I think the mandate from day one. So I want to share an anecdote. I joined PhonePe in the first 50. I was one of the first 50 employees. And when we joined, the first thing I did was I sat with my CTO, and we have heavily indexed on engineering and real-time data. Our data has been real-time since day one. There's a particular reason for that. Being in a country like India, when you deal with payments, you're dealing with an additional customer anxiety as well. As Indians, and when we deal with money, we have the level of anxiety is much more than all the other consumer products that users deal with. So being in this space, real-time data was very, very crucial for us. So the COVID situation was not really startling for us because we were always, our systems and our engineering, our data warehouse were always set up to scale with real-time data and with a volume of data. So the day the lockdown was announced that evening when the Prime Minister announced the lockdown, the only questions that we were getting were, where are we going to see the growth? And the next day we were ready to answer some of those questions. That we saw a spike in recharges, we saw a spike in bill payments, we saw a spike while offline stores were closed, and we saw people weren't venturing offline like all of us are speaking here. But we saw that people ordering groceries and the essentials spiked as well. So a lot of our questions were to deal with where are we seeing this additional growth? How do we capture these new users? How do we lock them in for a long term? Why didn't we get these users before COVID? And how do we engage with them on a continuous basis? So, yeah, this is how we dealt with the situation.
All right, good. Like it looks like you had the right set of. You were a benefactor basically from the conditions that you exploited. That is great. All right, let's move on to the next question. Just as a reminder, if you can keep your answers short, I think we just have about another 20 minutes, I think, to go on this panel, and we're just done with the first question. All right, Divya, let me start you off with this one. The results I got from the backend team. The poll that we just did, how long did it take for people to basically get the data back to their executives? 77% said weeks. So it took weeks. So assuming like you are in March, and then your executives are asking for the data, and it is coming back to you like in April or May, there is already like a couple of months into the pandemic, and while the business is suffering. In your opinion, like what do you think are the challenges in getting the data and insights faster to the executives? Is it a challenge where the data is like, an organization as complex as Ikea that you mentioned with 40 different operations in 40 different countries? The data is kind of, I would probably assume, is kind of spread across all these multiple countries. There are different data requirements in each of them. How do they actually get, and you also talked about how the business was not holistic, it was more regionalized, right? Was it a challenge with the data being disparate across these multiple places? Also from a consuming side, I would assume like different teams and different countries use different BI tools to basically crunch the data and get the analytics. So are these kind of problems, challenges that are slowing down the data delivery to with the insights to the executives?
Thanks, Ravi. I would be very surprised to hear that any big company does not have challenges with data, right? Because the bigger the company, the more the data, the more the systems, the more the geographical dispersion. I think data is always a challenge, and that's what you saw in the survey there. The good thing about Ikea is we did start our data journey a little while back, and that preparation really helped, during the COVID times. But if I look at the challenges of any company, I think disparate systems is one of the biggest challenges, right? At the end of the day, most big companies have not one system, but many operating systems, many source systems where the data is captured. And the moment you have lots of source systems, always becomes a problem to consolidate and actually make sense of that data. What I would really say helped us is asking the what and the why question, because sometimes too much data is actually a disadvantage, right? Quality more than quantity sometimes really helps from a data standpoint. And the way that you get to quality is actually by asking, what do you need and why do you need it, right? And can it really answer the question of, or what are the business problems? So I think the first thing we did is to say, okay, what are those business problems that we need, right? And what are those questions we need answered? And then we said, okay, what do we currently have that can answer those questions? And then what new do we really need to actually go after it? And I think this is not just during COVID times, but I've realized it over the span of, working with data for many years. Operational data, you need a lot, right? To feed into algorithms, to feed into machine learning systems, to feed into all the decision, the algorithmic decision making. But when you look at management decision making, you actually need to slim down as much as possible. And the insights are more important than the data, right? So how do you really go after those insights, and how do you pare down the data to make sure you have less, but it is much more powerful and much more qualitative in nature? And, so you can turn that challenge a little bit into an opportunity by asking those questions.
Got you. I think you said it right. If I can use an analogy, we are drowning in data, but we are thirsty for insights. So very well said. Ujjaini, let me bring you in. To the last question, you basically mentioned there is not much problem from a technology perspective, but let me explore from an organizational perspective. Prior to the pandemic, how was the data team structured within Z? And once the pandemic kind of hit, and once you started plowing through that, did the structure change, and did it make a huge difference in what Z becoming like a data-centric organization?
Right. So, during the pandemic, or before that, we had, in terms of the data team, ideally within the Z5, didn't go through much of change, and thankfully, we had a pretty good visionary thought when we started the whole organization as well as the Z5 as a product. It was a pretty good vision that data, take, and product actually creates the nucleus of the business, right? And consumers and contents are actually two sides of the same coin because they actually fulfill the whole process. So what actually became a change is, I would say, from the large Z as a parent company, right? So before that, Z was a very different data infrastructures. They had a very different setups. The way it runs was very different. Z5 was a complete different business setup, and these two worlds were not talking to each other, right? And one of the big thing we realized is, on our Z5 platform, ideally we are bringing the same Z content on the platform and consumers are watching, and digital is just another medium, TV versus digital. It would be really great if we bring this two data together and have a very unified view of our consumers in terms of all their footprints around the organization. And that's how, during this pandemic, the change that happened is data team has been taken out from one of this business, just Z5, and has actually made a horizontal function to be able to serve each and every business functions. And as exactly Divya said, that more and more we have disparate systems, it becomes very difficult to make sense of it. So we now have started creating a very unified data where from across the business, all data will come to the same data lake. It will be looked at it, and all the business will look at the same kind of metrics. So the top leaders get the right success metrics, what they need to look at, and the operational people will get more granular informations. And all of these are actually packed more in an insight and the action format, not just, raw data or kind of just a dashboard to chew at. So that is a very big change that we had gone through.
Okay, all right. It looks like you solved the problem. The next question was actually going to talk about the solution, but you kind of already ventured into it, so we'll come back to that. David, let me come to you from a logistics perspective. What were the challenges? Like, was your data kind of spread across multiple different systems? Just like Ujjaini, looks like they solved it by integrating the data into a single repository or something to that effect. What happened from your perspective?
Swiggy is a young company. So thankfully we have our data in one place. Actually not one place, maybe three places. It's not as bad as it is in many other companies. Also single geography, so single currency. So the issues of those things don't happen. But to answer your question, we had to do something else. So I'll just give you a few analysis we did in the early days. There was a rumor that non-veg food causes COVID. Okay, so people stopped ordering non-veg food. So now I had to find an analyst over the weekend who would be like, hey, can you just figure out which cities have this problem, which cuisines have this problem? Okay. Second, for example, my on-ground teams were saying, hey, we have 2 lakh restaurants on the platform. Most of them are shut down. I can work with individual restaurants to get them open. Can you give me a prioritized list of the restaurants by hyperlocal area so that we can go one by one from the top to the bottom. We had drivers who are logging in and getting 0 orders. Do we pay them? Do we not pay them? What do we tell them? And how much do we pay them, right? These are all questions that came to us. And these are obviously, as you can understand, very urgent, high priority items because the fate of our business depends on it. The thing that we realized at that point of time was that our business is very dependent on analysts and people trying to answer these questions. Okay, so at that point of time, what we did was I created you can say a WhatsApp group. I got one guy who would just hand out questions to everybody on the WhatsApp group, and we would get the answers back. Now the whole of 2020 was like that for us, heavily people constraints. Now I'm thinking, as head of analytics, is my job to lead the analytics team or to make the company take data-driven decisions in a better way? So 2021, the question I'm asking myself is, do we need these analysts to actually manually churn to all this data and get that information? Is there a different way where analysis in the company increases without the need for analysts, right? That's a question I'm asking, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more about it later on also. What we realized during COVID was that our company was heavily people dependent to answer these urgent, important questions. And if it takes a few days for the answer to come back, the business is constantly suffering. So how do we reduce the time to insight? How do we reduce the need for analysts to actually work on that? So those were the things that we got from our side. From a data perspective, I don't think we had problems on that side.
All right, good. So yeah, we will come back and talk about the solutions. So Pawan, let me turn to you in terms of finding the challenges. What did you guys have to do? Like, David kind of talked about wanting to automate much of the manual functions introducing analysts. Like, is there a technology that we can actually use to accelerate the delivery of the insights? Was there something that you guys actually did in the data science and artificial intelligence or machine learning that actually automated or increased the speed of delivery of the data and insights?
Awesome. Great question, actually. So before I answer that question, let me just walk you through. There was a fundamental, like a lot of businesses are going from 1 to 0, right? So there's panic inside the company with layoffs, with COVIDs and everything else. So we also needed to address the people problem, right? Because they're great talent. There's a lot of anxiety in the company. Are we going to lose talent, right? Are people going to go away, and so on and so forth, right? So the first thing that we actually sat down and discussed is like, hey, how do we solve our people problem? How do we motivate our people, right? We believe like people are extremely talented and people go and win the world for us, right? And we've seen that number of times, right? With innovation, with challenges that they face and the solutions that they come up with. So we kind of, built this hybrid model, right? So one where the reporting was actually centralized, right? The reason why we actually had to centralize this is because the collaboration increased, the retention would go up, right? Because we're having a direct channel with the CTO, with the CDO, with the CPOs, and so on and so forth. The centralization actually helped increase the morale of the team. Right, we got a lot of data science to come together, right? But we also knew that this alone is not going to solve a problem because we're a global business, right? COVID also had a very phased approach, right? The world didn't come to a standstill altogether, right? So different countries actually had a different timeline, they had a different product, they had a different use case to it, right? How they approached COVID, right? So then the hybrid approach was, while the reporting was centralized, right, we wanted our data scientists to be actually decentralized, working with their business teams, right, to identify problems, position the data scientists to work very closely with business units, in a practice that we call as embedding, right? So we actually followed this hybrid approach with like centralizing the team to like one leader, and so that way we're actually recruiting faster, we're retaining talent faster, we're removing bottlenecks. Right, we're improving collaborations, right? We're actually channeling all the insights up to our centralized level so that the decision making improves. And at the same time, we also went ahead and embedded our users with like our business units so that we're able to get the localized impact into context and solve that problem. Now, to address your second, right? We're now moving into an always on economy, right? Today, if you look at our data infrastructure, right, so the amount of data that you're collecting right now is already growing exponentially, right? The tools that we have to give real-time insights, right? The amount of data that you're capturing, the level, the details, the granularity, the type of data, right? I don't think so. We also have the tools today that is designed to actually create the right metadata for you to do a data lookup, to know which sources to rely on, right? There was one challenge there. And the second challenge is, hey, how do we go from, 1 day lag to near real time to close to real time, right? So this was also another challenge that came about, because while we were trying to give all the recommendations and insights, it was not coming as fast as we would wanted them to, right? Because we were also learning about the data. Just think of like recovery as a metric, right? Recovery is so different in different geographies, right? So there can't be like a centralized equation to it. So this was also a time where we invested heavily on our data infrastructure platforms, right? Which could basically stream a lot of data, and we built like a layers of visualizations on top of it, which gave us that amplitude of insights close to real time, right? And I think we've not solved that problem yet, right? We've just at the cusp of it. The data is going to explode. The amount of data that you're going to capture is going to explode, right? With the always-on economy, right? Now there is this big question that everybody, every institution, every organization that needs to answer is: do we have the right infrastructure to go ahead and solve this problem, right? Not just from a querying perspective, right, but also to ensure that we are making the right informed decisions, and how close can we get, right, from a real-time perspective.
Okay, good. All right, so we are towards probably about 5-6 minutes away from the end of the panel session. So let's launch into the final question. And actually, many of you started discussing about the solution. So Jaini, Pawan, you guys. Achal, let me actually start with you for the last question. You pretty much characterized your company as being the youngest in the panel session over here. So in terms of the solution, so we all understand as business users, I'm a business user, having the data in one central place is very easy for me to go and just get the data that I want, to understand the relationship among the data so that I can affect the business decisions that I can do in terms of increasing the marketing for my company. What is it that you guys did towards providing that unified view and providing those data to the consumers? There are various different technologies that come into picture. There is the notion of data virtualization, data fabric, data lake. Ujjaini kind of talked about it. What is the technology that you kind of put in place that provides this unified view across all the disparate data sources that we just talked
about? Yeah. Very similar to Swiggy as a business, right? PhonePe operates only in India, and we haven't had the issue of having multiple sources of data. We have a central repository. But the question you're asking is a very good one. Till today, we have solved for, I think, let me before that say, the best way to scale, I think, is to be out of path. I think when you're in path, you'd have to scale with people. We don't want to scale with people. We want to scale with technology. What I mean by that is, today, all our business stakeholders have access to aggregated data. They can play around with aggregated data using our BI tools. But what we have realized is that to scale, that's not sufficient. They need to be able to play with the raw data. Today, analysts can play with raw data. We're given the size of our data and the size of our repository. Analysts can play around with raw data and use the querying tools. But business stakeholders can't actually play around with raw data. I think that is the path, and that is where we are moving towards. Today, for example, if you ask me, on a daily basis, how many transactions did we go through, how many customers, how many are attriting, you get the data from a simple BI tool. But if they really want to dig deeper into specific cohorts, they want to apply their own filters, I think that's the big challenging problem we are taking up as an organization. That is, I think all of us would agree here that we are all data-driven companies. But I think what most of the analytics leaders are trying to solve is to make the org data savvy. And I think where the boundary is all of our organizations take decisions based on data, and analytics teams are powering those data with insights and stuff. But I think the key challenge and our vision specifically for PhonePe, the goal is to make sure that analytics doesn't have to be in path to generate those insights. And that is the vision I and my team are working towards, is to how do we make business stakeholders self-sufficient? Like you as a business user, how do I not even discuss with you? I don't want to talk to you for your insight. I want you to open up a couple of consoles, play around with the data, derive your insights, go ahead. Like I should be totally blind to how you took those decisions. So I think that's the biggest path to scale. So.
Awesome. And trust me, like I am a business user, I also don't like to talk to the IT. If I can get my data just by myself, I would really love that. All right. So let's go to Divya again. Like, we are short on time, so if you can just keep your answer short for a minute or so. You did talk about the disparateness of the data given the large operations that you have. Is there a way that you guys are actually providing some unified data, maybe not at a global level, but at a regional level?
Yeah. The two words I would use here are agility and flexibility, right? Those have become so key to the business, to any business, and definitely to our business. So if you look at it I mean, we've gone away from the extracting data and loading it in a certain format and parts of data and actually then consuming it. We've really gone towards more of how do you get data at source, very similar to what Achal is talking about. And whether you call it data mesh, you call it, virtualization in some companies. I think a lot of companies are now embracing the fact that for agility and flexibility, you need different kinds of data. The data that you load somewhere today is not relevant tomorrow, and you need completely different data to make a different decision. So while the BI, etc., is still, pretty constant in companies, what comes in the middle has changed a lot. It's no longer about staging. It's a lot more about how do you really get the data at source and virtualize it a lot more.
Okay, very well said. In fact, within Denodo, we talk about this concept of collect versus connect. As you said, the data is so disparate and so fast moving in terms of its generation. By the time you collect it all into one source to make the analysis, it's already outdated. Instead, we should be looking at connecting to the data at the sources wherever they are and providing the insights right from there. So very well said. Ujjaini, let's come to you. You kind of talked about the solution already, but let me ask you a question more from an organizational perspective. How do you deal with if there's a resistance from the top leaders in terms of the changes that they need to make? Is there something that you have kind of encountered, and what did you guys do?
Absolutely, Ravi. And I think, I was hearing what Achal was saying and Divya was saying. That's exactly, was the problem statement we were trying to solve in Z5 also. We also have this aggregated BI platforms, but every time someone wants to do, double click to each of these things to go a little more granular beyond 1 or 2 steps, they need to come back to us. So we are trying to, first of all, solve that. And what I have the challenge is there are two kind of business. One is a business which is, far more long grown. And we have a business digital where the leaders are far more, data savvy. The digital leaders want to actually have this kind of tools at their hand where they can do it themselves. So the DIY quotient is very high for them. Whereas the other side, for a long years, it had been spoon fed to the top leaders. So now if I even take to them a beautiful BI platforms for them, I need a person who look at that and tell me the insights. But, why can't you actually, put your hands dirty into it and actually look at it? Because that's the education. And we are trying to call it like a democratizations and bringing the power of data to the hand of business, and they should not come back to us. So it's a two-way challenge, right? One is a technology challenge, exactly how Achal mentioned, and that's a tech solution that we are trying to figure out, that how can I have a layer which actually connects to all the data sources that I have, and business users will be able to just utilize it. The other side is ensuring that the education, the awareness, the zeal actually comes from the business side, so that they are also encouraged to do that themselves and get the value out of it at the end of it. That's a big challenge. And I think 2021 is something that we really want to strive through that. Let's see how well we can do around it. But yes, that's a very real challenge for us.
Okay, awesome. Well, David, you might be the last one for this particular one. So let's talk about, from the solution perspective. You already indicated that you did not have the problem with the disparateness. You're pretty much, honed it down to 1 or 3 systems. But talk about from a democratization perspective. So Ujjaini kind of talked about. To me, like democratization means that I, as a business user, I'm free to use the tools that I want, right? Achal talked about like the self-service aspect. I in marketing would like to use maybe in a Tableau, but in the sales, they might have liked to use like Click and so on. Is there something that you guys have enabled from a democratization perspective in order to the different divisions to use the tools that they would like?
So at Swiggy, we've kind of taken a more centralized approach, which is we've chosen a BI tool or any other kind of tool, which is kind of it suits most of the people. In very rare cases, we actually get other tools for specific use cases. So in this case, the marketing team, for example, has a specific tool that they use, but most of the company has a standardized tool. So one thing I would like to say is a plus one to what Achal said, by the way. We are trying to democratize insights for everybody. Just one thing that I'd like to say is I actually went to my CEO and I said, you need to do this. And I got a commit from him to force the rest of the company to actually agree to self-serve data analysis. So now June 30th is a date I've taken. And I'm telling all my peers in the other teams that we will support you all the way till June 30th through processes, through training, through purchase of the tools, all of these things to enable democratization, including we are starting something called analyst office hours, where anyone has any problem with any analysis that they're doing themselves, they can actually like a consultation with an analyst to actually help them solve their problems. But come June 30th, you're on your own. Okay, and we're just going to turn off the tap there. And we said all simple work has to be done by you guys. All complex work will come to us, and we actually have a definition of what simple and complex work are. And so we've got the commit, and we're rolling out on that and doing these trainings, tech enablement, all of these things for each of the teams specifically, business group by business group, to enable them to happen. Okay, Ravi, I do. Also want to repeat about our data strategy, right? So we have a lot of our data coming into our S3, which is available real time for us, but we don't use the S3 data. Our data warehouse actually picks it up from there in a batch mode every morning. So we lose the real timeness in our data warehouse. Then we have our BI tools, which pick up the data from our data warehouse, create another copy there. So now we have 3 different versions of the thing, and each of those is a little bit delayed, and we lose some of the real-time streaming aspects as they go. Then we have a parallel streaming platform, which also is taking from this data lake that we have. So it's not heading up in the right way, is what I would say. On the democratization side, I think we are on the right track, but on the data side, it is heading up in a way that we'll end up with duplicates of data being created, which I would say is a cause for concern. So on the process side, we are actually very good, but on the tech side, I think we are heading into some little bit of trouble in the future.
Yeah, I can say that, replication is bad. And we talked about it with Divya too. Like, you want to be able to connect to the data wherever it is and not really collect the data. The more you collect, the data gets out of sync very quickly, and then there's a delay involved, and also there's a time to propagate the data from one system to another. So
yes.
Avoid replication as much as you can. So that's great. All right, so I think with that, we have kind of exhausted our time. I think it was a great panel. Thank you very much for your lovely insights, and good luck in proceeding forward and success in your business. Hopefully post-pandemic, I should say. I don't know how long this is going to take.
Thank you for being a really good moderator, Ravi.
You're welcome. Thanks, Divya.
Excellent.
Thank you, Ravi.
So, dear panelists, just before you leave this stage and forum virtual screen right now, we just got one question. We've got just a minute for that. We'd like your quick thoughts on it. Ravi, I've posted it for the convenience of our panel. Abhishek from the audience asked that how do you train people to use data in an organization where people are not data savvy? So I just leave that as a question open to everyone on the same. Ravi, if you could guide us as to how to take it forward with this question.
Okay, all right. So it's a great question. So definitely there are people within the organization who are not data savvy. So how do you basically enable it, dump it down to a way that they can actually understand? So David, let me start with you. So just 15 seconds in terms of how do you make it foolproof or make it easy for people who are not savvy to understand?
So okay, buying a tool doesn't work. Training doesn't work. Okay, what actually works is somebody helping them actually solve the problem. So what we've done at Swiggy is somebody comes to us with the problem, say, hey, can you do this analysis for me? I've told my analyst, so I will not do this analysis for you. Let me show you how to do this on this tool. And you do it a few times, and then they actually figure out that it's not that complex of work, and they actually do it themselves. Okay, so I think the best way to do it is to work along with people to actually show them how to do this analysis, and then once they understand that it's not that bad, they will actually start doing it themselves. Okay, training and tools don't work.
Great. Yeah, you teach them how to fish, not necessarily give them a fish every single time they ask for it. Awesome. Ujjaini, again, 15 minutes, 15 seconds on your side in terms of now, how do you enable someone who's not data savvy?
I think, also creating the need is also something very important. And, probably the COVID is a thing which created that need. Like demand literally grew up from a cost constraint. We couldn't hire more data scientists. So very clearly that, it had to be democratized, just not the data, but also working of it. So I think that need creation also helped. And we found, and exactly David said, that we started actually hand holding. So we don't call it a training session, but more hand holding session where people do their own projects, as a help from the analyst. So I think, that need creation also helped.
Okay, all right, Achal, let me go to you next. So in terms of being the youngest organization, is there anyone who's not data savvy in your organization?
I think the cultural problems are the toughest to solve. This is a cultural problem. When it is technology, it's an easy solve. It's all black and white. When you have to induce such a culture, I agree with David, maybe show and tell. I think training doesn't work. We took a stab at it a year back, trying to train people to do it themselves. I think that's a very long road. So I think show and tell is probably the best approach.
Gotcha. And Divya, I'm pretty sure you've faced this in different parts of the world, some being more data savvy than others. How did you guys solve this?
I think, a quick 3 points. First is we have to make peace with the fact that not everybody can be data savvy and will be data savvy. I think we need to make peace with it. I think the second thing is that it starts with leadership. The more data savvy the leadership is, it really flows down the organization in a very strong manner. And the third is, I think, I won't say training, but education, because a lot of people want to be, but they don't know how to be. And I think it is sometimes good to educate as to how do you read data, how do you imbibe data, and how do you really, but the will needs to be there. Like I said, the first point is important, but the second, you need to know who has the will, who doesn't, to do it.
Well, very well said. The data literacy has to start at the top. And that actually drives the culture down the organization. So very well said. So Pawan, last to you, but not the least. So, a short answer in terms of, is there anyone who is not data savvy at Uber?
I think I'm pretty fortunate that Uber is a very data-centric organization, all the way from the top to the bottom. But however, we want to kind of improve the data literacy. So we came up with this very simple thing: first degree, second degree, and third degree analysis. There's a clear bifurcation. So all the first degree analysis should be self-serve, right? And we've been running this program from the leadership till the bottom. Right, talking to what Divya mentioned, it's not training, it's about education and data literacy education, literally, and we call it free the data. Right, the topic is, hey, how can we kind of democratize data with all our employees in the company? And this program is actually kicked off really well. And additionally, the first degree analysis, we train them on how to kind of think data, right? We train them on how not just read data, but also add context to that data. Right. And, the free the data as a program is basically, imbibe such aspirations. I mean, we're seeing a lot of engineers wanting to move to data, a lot of product managers, right? APMs and PMs, right? Who just joining the organization, starting to create an impact, right? Wanting to become a lot more data savvy. And that culture is kind of growing upward and bottom. And we're seeing a big impact with this program kind of being out there. And then this is not a one-time program. This is a repetitive program. We keep running this, twice a year. And we see a lot of traction. And then we also go back and monitor saying, hey, for the people who've been taught, right, are they using some of our tools? Are they using some of our systems? We kind of monitor some of that data as well. We've seen such great results with experimentation. I think one of the things that we wanted our PMs to learn really quickly is about how to read experiments, how to design experiments, right? It's so important for us to understand causation, right? We started with that. Right, you don't necessarily need an analyst or a scientist to interpret the experimentation results to you, as long as it's actually relayed back to you in a sense that it's very easily understood. Right, so we're kind of putting some processes and also enabling our tools to give the right information and improve that data literacy with this program called Free the Data across the company.
Okay, all right. Looks like we have a great solution. Obviously, we couldn't fit that all within the time frame. Maybe we should have another panel on just your answer alone. So with that, I think Abhishek got more than what he asked for. So Bhavana, back to you.
Thank you, Ravi. I was just going to say the same, that Abhishek couldn't have asked for a better answer, because he got all the aspects from all the companies right now. So once again, a big thank you to all our eminent panelists, and Ravi, excellent moderation, as everyone would resound in your panel. Thank you for moderating and curating this session so wonderfully. With this, we'd really like to thank once again our panel. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you all. Nice
Thank you
meeting
so
you.
much.
Thank you.